I met Paddy probably in '52. He was one of the late writers coming onto the show. And Gordon Duff did his very first Philco show, which was Holiday Song with Joe Buloff. Very successful. I did his next one, which was probably Printer's Measure. And from that point on, I was scheduled to work with Paddy more than any other director. I think Arthur did one show, and Vinny may have done one show with him, and I did all the rest of Paddy's.
Why, did you two particularly hit it off?
Yes, and that and just pure chance, just the luck of the draw as scripts came ready. We were never ahead on scripts. We always were struggling to get a script to go into rehearsal with. One of the biggest problems that Fred had. But essentially, it worked out both because of chance and because Fred felt that I worked well with Paddy and that Vinny Donahue worked well with Horton Foote.
What sort of fellow is Paddy Chayefsky?
Voluble. Paddy talked a blue streak. It was not the sort of being on a soapbox that became his talking method in his later life, but he had a lot to say about everything. Paddy was very good. We got along quite well together. I gave him more freedom on the set than almost any other writer, simply because his stories at that time were all about the Bronx, the Jewish Bronx lingo and patois and attitudes. And while I felt that I understood the human relationships, I didn't necessarily understand all the references that were made and why they would say this or why they would take this attitude toward that. So I would question him, and he would give me full answer. Paddy had the great good sense never to talk with the actors. When an actor would come up to him, being there in rehearsal, he would say, "Don't ask me that question, ask Del." Then he would come to me and fill me in on what else the actor was troubled about, and so I knew how to respond to it. But he would never supersede me in any way, very wisely, so that the director-actor relationship was preserved at all times. Paddy wrote absolutely brilliantly of himself and his family, his background, his upbringing. He was a remarkable writer, and he was extremely capable and willing to make changes when necessary because of length or because an actor was having a problem with a scene, problem with words. He would hear something that he would think was not ringing correctly to his ears, and he would come to me and suggest a change. It was a very close, wonderful relationship. I think I did about 8 or 9 television shows with Paddy and 3 feature films.
Do you think his appeal was mainly to urban audiences and ethnic audiences?
Probably that was his major appeal. However, when we did Marty, I do remember distinctly that the response from people everywhere, both by phone and by mail, and people of obvious great variety of ethnic backgrounds, all essentially saying the same thing: "This is the story of my life. How could you tell it so honestly? I cried. This was me." And it was all people responding to this story about a lonely Jewish Bronx butcher. Now, Paddy, by that time, had written several stories with that as the kind of background, not butchers, but Bronx stories, Jewish stories. He was afraid of getting ethnically tight, so he deliberately set forth to change. And in Printer's Measure, he made them Irish. And in Marty, he made them Italian, Catholic. But it all worked because the human relationships were the same, and the attitudes and the pressures of families that had not been over here many generations and were living at a certain level of economic life were absolutely the same, whether they were Jewish, Italian, or whatever. And he touched people across a wide scope.